So the data collective and me, I will be talking for about maybe half an hour, and then we can have a Q&A. So if questions come up whilst I am talking, please do put them in the Q&A. And this is a cheeky on my part, because I know one of my fellow data collective organisers, at least one actually, Tom French, is in the room. So Tom can help me answer them in the chat if they come in early enough. Right, so the data collective. Firstly, who am I? If you've been at the festival a little while now, you will recognise me. So I'm sorry you have to hear me introduce myself again, but just for those who are new, I'm Giselle. That is me, yes, wearing a hat to demonstrate 3 different hats. So firstly, I'm Executive Director of DataKind UK. We're a charity that helps other charities use data science. I am, of course, also one of your festival hosts. And then thirdly, but not last or least, I am a data collective organizer. So that's just to situate me, because you might be confused as to why I keep talking about different things. They are my 3 work hats. But what is this data collective thing that I am mentioning? So it is this. It is a community for people who use or want to use data in the social sector to connect with and learn from each other, and to share data and approaches for effective data sharing. That is what this data collective is. We know that now. We didn't quite know that when we started out. So the data collective is a pilot. We started out in November. We got funding from Catalyst. It's a lottery-funded digital data transformation project that came about after COVID. And they gave us a bit of funding to kind of do this pilot. I want to explain why they did that, why this pilot came about. So to do that, I'm going to go back in time. But not for long, because that's actually quite an nauseating gift. And tell you, firstly, what we noticed that made us do this in the first place, back last summer, actually, nearly a year ago. The hypothesis we used to begin this journey, what we did, what we found, and what now. So they're the 5 sections I'm going to take you through. Before I jump into that, I'm just going to note that thank you. A bunch of people have voted. Massively appreciate that. So we have about 60% yes, have heard of the data collective, 40% no, and about 40% yes are members of the data collective, and 60% no. So that's wonderful. Wonderful to have people who've heard of the collective, even better to have people who are a member of the collective. And then welcome to those who haven't heard about us yet. Hopefully you'll learn loads about the community and maybe even want to join during this presentation. So a bit about what we noticed. So why did this data collective thing spring up? Where did it come from? Well, I don't need to tell everyone here, the pandemic changed the reality of things in the social sector quite starkly and rapidly. One of the things it made us all realise come March last year was that a lot of organisations wanted to respond rapidly, but couldn't perhaps respond as quickly or as laser focusedly as they wanted to protect and support the most vulnerable of their beneficiaries and the communities they serve. So we realised, I say we, it's a royal we, a lot of us, perhaps yourselves included, realised that perhaps we could do something to try and help, to try and mean we weren't quite stuck in this position. So first we got together and said, okay, what's the needs? What are the things that have come about that we think we want to understand better? And we saw these 4 things. So we said there was a need to better understand the current and emerging needs of individuals and communities during the crisis, i.e. how are things changing? Secondly, what services are being delivered to help meet those needs? Thirdly, whether those services are effective, of course, the diamond question. And lastly, how the lockdown has financially impacted people and organisations that serve them. And these are the questions on everyone's lips, and it just wasn't, frankly, clear what was what the answers were, but it was, we felt, at least a little bit clear how we might get to some of those answers, and that kind of leads us to our hypothesis. We said, all right, okay, this is the things we know we want to better understand what might help us to better understand them. We said, okay, well, we're not sure, but we think this. We think if we bring together a community of organisations from across the social sector with experience of working with data or a willingness to share data with each other and others, we could create the conditions now and in the future for better joint working that makes acting on these challenges easier. I apologise, that's a long sentence. It's a long hypothesis that basically said, can we bring a community together who can overcome some of the data-related challenges which have led us to basically a lack of collective understanding about who we serve, where the gaps are, what's changed. And there's more. This was something that maybe a bunch of you were involved in back in the summer of last year. I'm going to put it in the chat. We, DataKind and loads of other organisations put our name to this blog that Rachel Rank, then at Catalyst, spearheaded. So that's kind of the seed from which this idea grew. We felt that this was the likely benefits of this, if we were right, were so great that it was worth a bit of investigation, and Catalyst and their fund, the National Lottery, felt so too, and that's why we were able to move on to a bit of action. That a big stream of our work since November has been user research. So every now and then I'll nod to that. And I just want to bring in at this point a quote from one of our participants who said, "We're serving the same user group. We all know it's a good idea. We can learn from each other. Let's pool our data." And said also they wanted to create shared understanding of need and our contributions where there is overlap and where we can be more joined up. So that's, I wanted to make sure this wasn't all my words, and actually some of this is coming straight from the people that joined the collective early on and helped us shape what it might look like. So that was a hypothesis. So all well and good, but what did we do? So in response, we went and we bid for this pot that the Catalyst had put out, and got it. And the first thing we did in response was to assemble. Here we got together a dream team. So I'm speaking to you from DataKind. I'm only one of the many members of this amazing team which came together to deliver the Data Collective. I've mentioned the wonderful Tom French. You might have also seen him doing a bunch of talks at the Data for Good Fest, because he's all things Data for Good, and including facilitator of Sheffield Data for Good. Social finance, we've got Tom Rinton and Grace from there. Centre for Youth Impact, I think Bethia is also at the festival. Newspeak House, a college for kind of political use of technology. Moore, who is head of data at Parkinson's, although you did this in a community coordinator capacity. And then comms help from our very own Nicole at DataKind and from Laura Tangent. So the first thing we did was to mobilise. We said, we don't want this just to be DataKind. Let's get together the people that know best. Let's collaborate as a starting point. Great. So we've got the team. We've got a bunch of wonderful people. They're all very happy to be here. But what do we do? Well, we start off by creating a shared community. This, for those who are eagle-eyed, will notice is a Slack channel. One time you might be part of. We wanted to get people with a shared virtual space, so we did that by creating the Slack community. Obviously, not perfect for everyone. No tool is going to be, but this was basically, we did this for ease of us, because it's where DataKind already lived. So he said, and I have a vendetta against Microsoft Teams. It seems to kill my computer every time I open it. So he said, okay, let's create a Slack community. And here you've got Owen Broaden, actually from MenCap, who's actually speaking there and doing one of the fireside chats with me during this festival. Has put in there the great UK-wide index multiplication data set, which, if you haven't seen, actually, I highly recommend. Deprivation used to be country-based, and now we've got this UK one, which is very exciting. We're human, so we didn't want to leave it all to async communication. So we also did some, albeit virtual, in-person or real-time get-togethers. So this is a community call at Christmas time. That's the tree, and we kind of got together and shared challenges, see if we could kind of come up with solutions together, but also just get to know each other, see what other people were working on, and we did some learning of, I think this, I'm misleading because this screenshot I think was from a community call, but I'm using it to represent the fact we also did a lot of like structured workshops and learning events on various topics with a focus on data sharing, but also doing things like showcasing some excellent data sector, social sector data initiatives as well. So that on top of this, I don't have a good photo of it, but one other thing we did was to provide one-to-one technical support. So part of our budget included basically free consultancy from social finance to a bunch of organisations to see if we could kind of help them get to the point where they were feeling confident about sharing data with others. And we also wanted, a big part of what we wanted to do is kind of highlight what's going on. So this is our website, and just a screenshot of a page we have that highlights data initiatives in the social sector. So that's what we did. We did it over the course of 4 months. We did as I mentioned, a significant user research strand in parallel. It's not ideal to do user research in parallel with the doing, but we were working within the bounds of a particular timeline from the lottery that meant that's what we had to do, and so we did it. It did mean that we kind of got to the end of the pilot period, kind of saying, okay, now we get it, but we at least could facilitate some connections and provide some learning and support along the way as well. Our pilot period officially ended in on Friday week at the end of April. We are going to continue on a bit of a skeleton staff, and in the longer term kind of seek funding to do this on hopefully on a bigger, more sustainable, longer term scale. But before I get onto the future and all the ambitions and aspirations we have, what did we find from 4 or 5 months of working with loads of data bods from across the social sector? This is a wonderful schematic. It is probably going to involve loads of people kind of going like that and looking into their computer screens. It's linked to from the Data Collective website, which I'm going to stick in the chat now. So I suggest you, if you are interested, then you, Tom, you've already, amazing, you put the website in here already, then you go and find it and have a good look, particularly if this kind of diagram is your thing, which was made by the wonderful Tom French, who's a big fan of diagrams and an excellent user researcher. So this is combining, I think, his 2 favorite things, and is not our only diagrams. We also have, we also have this one. I'm not going to go through these. I put them up basically as a way to signal the fact that we've done loads of wonderful user research, but basically not have time to kind of go through it all now. What I will do now is talk about some of the headlines of that long period of user research. So here's my very condensed 5 pointers, and I go through all of them. There is a need, be a facilitator, not a provider. One size doesn't fit all. Have a reserved space. Data maturity matters, but other factors matter more. These are the 5 big things we found along the way. I'm just going to go through them all just to say a little bit more about them. So the first one, there is a need. So we were really glad that this Data Collective thing had a bit of funding and that we were going to kick it off, but we were a little bit unsure if we'd find any need out there, or if actually it was the same 7 people that we already knew who wanted to talk about this stuff and work on this stuff, but actually beyond that, there wasn't much need. I didn't think that likelihood was high, but it could have happened, and I don't want to presuppose the ending. We put out feelers, we spun up the website, community, etc., and we tried to advertise as best we could. when our budget for advertising was zero. And we found that people were really keen to get involved. So there's kind of two metrics we use for kind of our baseline community size. One is the Slack, which I think was on that screenshot a second ago. I think it's about 135 when I took that screenshot. And then the other one is our mailing list, which is about 350. So that showed it wasn't just a few of us, in a back room and thick cigar smoke talking about the same issues decade after decade. Actually, there was a lot more people who wanted to get involved. I'll about to skip ahead. I won't. Our second point, facilitator, not provider. We found that people were keen to make connections, be part of a community where they could share and learn and understand. They didn't just want to like absorb and be given things and attend and be passive. So we found that our role was definitely not as just a kind of putting on a course or an event or creating a thing. Actually, it was about creating the environment and space for others to kind of get together and do that themselves. I think there was a clear leader-follower divide that is kind of sits underneath this, which is to say that some organisations are in a position to take leadership roles in the world of kind of social sector data use, and others are really engaged and motivated and keen, but not for whatever reason, either organisationally or individually, not in a position to lead. And we saw very clearly those two groups. One size doesn't fit all. I wish it did. That would make our job so much easier. It doesn't, or we found it didn't. And by this, I mean that there is a massively varying degree of, well, as we know from all the different presentations we've had over the festival, there's a massive degree of variation in data literacy, data maturity, and in activity already organisations, and we wanted to see if the collective could kind of make room for all of that. Our conclusion was that it can make room for a lot of it, probably not all of it, but we do have to be quite broad and kind of diverse in terms of the different areas we're looking at, because that is the kind of sector we're engaging with. Everyone is at a very different place. Number 4 was reserve space. By that we mean that organisations were keen to have somewhere where they could talk to others in similar organisations, perhaps facing similar challenges. They would rather not be kind of surveilled or used as a kind of source for being kind of academic research subjects, for example, or don't want to be kind of sold things. They're keen that it's a space where the focus is on those organisations talking to each other, rather than a lot of kind of other actors coming in. So that's what we mean there by reserve space. As a facet to that, I think there's something interesting about the nature of the organisation. So we found that there was a bit of a difference in the challenges faced by service delivery organisations versus other forms of non-profit and civil society organisation. And I think we're never 100% clear about kind of how exclusive we should be on terms of those service delivery organisations, but definitely going forward, there's something there to be worked out in terms of how we make sure that those kind of two different groups of need get met. And lastly, data maturity matters, but other factors matter more. So here, the kind of some of the other things we're alluding to here is, for example, an organisation's motivation and on some of the goals the data collective had. So, for example, if an organisation's not particularly data mature, but is really, really keen on getting to a point where it can be more transparent with its data and maybe share aggregated data with other organisations or use other organisations' shared data, then they might move rapidly to the degree to which their starting point is kind of negated. We also saw the importance of some shared context really coming through. If anyone was at the fireside chat yesterday, you might have heard me say that I was really blown away when looking at the ticket list for this festival and the 450 people that signed up, and I did stuck it in, exported it to CSV, did a pivot table of everyone's roles, and the biggest grouping was 9. Most of the groupings were 1, so no grouping at all, and thus basically very diverse. Data cleaning aside, very diverse job titles bring people to the same place, and we really found that it was a harder challenge for us bringing this community together, because we weren't bringing together a bunch of data analysts. We were bringing together some data analysts and some head of finance and some people who would say they were BI, business intelligence folk, and some people who were in charge of the sales force and didn't go beyond that, and some people who were head of transformation or head of digital, or CEO. So massive variety, and that's a wonderful thing. Also quite a challenge as well if your premise is kind of community and shared bonds. So that's a bit about what we learned. There's so much more, and if this kind of thing does interest you, then I would really recommend going to that URL Data Collective site and having a read of the user research page. Tom has produced a wonderful, rich report on everything we found, and loads more voices of the Data Collective community will come out as well. So I said my 5 out of 5. My last section was what now. So I mentioned we've come to the end of the pilot stage. So our next stage is to basically get funding for a longer term thing, hopefully to the timescale of multiple years rather than multiple months, because building a community in 4 months is hard. Not that we did, because we were building off loads of pre-existing communities, so it was developing. But nonetheless, 4 months is quite tricky. But what do we want to achieve in that time? What has our experience, our user research told us will be useful? So for that, another list. This time, one at a time. I've got, how many things do I have on here? 5 kind of buckets of things that we think the Data Collective should be doing now, based on what we've heard and learnt and been told. The first one, provide space to build relationships and work together. So if you remember the very starting premise of all of this, it was that actually if we can be more collective minded, if we can share our data responsibly, we can have a better map. We can make a patchwork out of all our individual bits of wisdom and data to collectively understand need and how that need changes. That might be our end goal, but that's not a technical challenge. There's a technical element of that, but primarily that's a challenge around building trusting relationships between individuals from different organizations, and then enabling them, giving them a kind of platform and environment in which to work together. So that's what we want to do. We want to say, let's abstract this away from the fact that it's about swapping CSVs and making sure that our geography grain is the same, and actually point out that this is about people trusting each other to use each other's data well, not to be misrepresented, to work collaboratively and not competitively, etc. So let's build a space for that to happen. Help organisations to share examples. So I've talked a bit about the fact we try to always put data initiatives into the ether, onto the web, on our website whenever we found them. The reason we did this is because a lot of the things we were hearing were about challenges in understanding what's possible, and you see people really, I hope this has maybe happened to you, or I've seen it happen to others over the course of this festival even, you see people really light up when they see what's possible and what might be kind of in the imaginary, in the future for their organization. And that's hard to do if you don't have any ideas. So we want to help organisations share examples with each other. We've seen that to be a thing people want, and also a thing that has great impact. Support skill development. So this has a few bits in. So of course we want to develop, but it can be harder for all of us as a community of data people in the social sector to develop our skills than in other places where data people are. By that I mean a finding from this user research, and actually from putting my data finder hat on from our decade of supporting organisations, is that if you for example compare people coming from industry, whatever that might be, private enterprise, often there are data teams, they often have support in place. There's often a lot of shared learning. There's, at an extreme, there's pair coding where you're doing everything together, but there's lighter versions of that that allow people to work together and learn from each other. If you are a one-person data army, which we see a lot of, particularly in smaller organisations, that you don't have that environment, and it makes it hard to kind of throw ideas around and do all the things as humans we naturally like to do to learn from each other. And in fact that kind of came up yesterday. There was a bit of talk. Martin from CAP, who gave a kind of charity data story, talked about imposter syndrome, and a lot of us, myself included, got our data analysis, data science skills quite organically, and squeeze them in on the job, or basically in ways that weren't traditional learning environments. And that does kind of open the way for imposter syndrome, particularly if we're learning on our own. So how do we counteract some of those things? These three on the slide are our ideas. So firstly, create an open repository for resources. So if you create something that was really helped you along, share it with others, and we collaborate to make those resources even better. Get training. So there's a bunch of free stuff available, but there's also paid stuff, which is pretty good. Can we help organizations access that? And then lastly, looking at a more strategic or a leadership level, mentoring for CEOs or C-suite people within nonprofits who want to help their organization go through organizational transformation. And if there's any theme that's come through the festival, it's that data transformation isn't just a technical challenge. It is a cultural one. Organizational transformation is really what we're talking about, and it's a challenge. So how can we help organizations do that? Penultimate point, unblocking, I call this. So open access, free office hours type support for technical, ethical, legal, procurement and strategy challenges. So there was a lot of, in the Data Collective, a lot of people helping to unblock each other. So by just providing that little bit of support to get someone over the line. So helping increase kind of access to that. And then our last point is giving the sector, or the whatever we are, us section of the sector that's interested in data, all here assembled, giving us kind of collective voice. So helping to amplify some of the things that we need and want to kind of help make our jobs better, whether that's an improvement on a public data set, or whether that's kind of peer learning or whatever that might be. So that's what we want to do next. What do I have now? This is my closing slide. I've talked to you for half an hour, and that is definitely long enough. I think all that's left to say from me is please get involved if you haven't already. Please tell us what we can do better and how we can meet your needs. If you have experienced the Data Collective and have been involved, and then of course please ask questions now. I'd love to hear them. Right, I'm going to come back to the festival screen. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Okay, I've got 2 questions. Please do add more in there if you actually, I'm juggling too many festival sessions, so I don't know when this ends. 20 past. Okay, so we have, if we need it, 14 minutes. Ali Hanbury, what kind of insight did you get re data maturity in the sector? Great question. I'd say if you're interested in data maturity in this sector, watch, if you didn't already, go to Sian's talk earlier, watch the recording of that, because that will give you more insight than probably my answer will. But what did we get on data maturity in the sector? So I think the main learning on data maturity is that data sharing, so this idea that was the original kind of kernel for the data collective, is not a thing that most organizations are ready to do. It is a thing that a lot of organizations want to do, we're excited about, and I guess aspire to be part of, whether a recipient or a giver of their data. But getting organizations there is quite a different beast. And I think if you focus on just the data sharing organizations, you can pick off the low-hanging fruit of those organizations that are doing great stuff, and then you can just nudge them over the line to kind of just get them sharing aggregated data, either kind of one-to-one relationships or on a kind of dump a CSV onto a website way, but it's more open. But that will leave 99.9999% of the social sector kind of unaffected. So one thing that we learned over the period was to essentially like broaden the funnel of the support. So instead of being at this very narrow bit at the bottom of the funnel where we're saying, okay, we'll grab those organizations who are nearly ready and just give them that extra incentive, we said, okay, there's so few of them that let's try and be a bit broader actually, and let's say, look, we know you're not about to do this. We're not expecting you to do this, particularly not in a few months. But we think that if we provide X, Y, and Z, you'll at least get a bit closer. And so see it as a bit of a slow burn. So I think that was our main reflection. I suppose the kind of facet of that is that I would very much imagine it isn't going to be news to anyone in this session, but it's just not all technical. That the data maturity challenges are as much cultural as they are technical. And we had loads of people actually saying, yeah, but what's the winning argument for my CEO? I think this is a great idea, but how do I get it done at the organizational level? And yes, maybe once they've got sign off from whoever they need to get sign off from, they'll then have some technical challenge, particularly if they don't just want to like provide some summary statistics, but if they want to do it in a way which is very joinable to other data sets, then there might be some technical challenges. But there's not a bunch of organizations who are like, yes, I'm on board, I just need to figure out X and Y. There's loads of different elements that need to be supported by many organizations. So I'm just going to order them by popular. No, we don't have much. We don't have much upvoting. If you are interested in upvoting, go and give the little thumbs up a tick. Will you share your analysis of the diversity of participants in this event? That's from Sian, who is head of data auction. As in the festival. I don't know if you mean the festival or this particular event. Probably not this particular event, because I don't think Hopin will tell me who attended a particular session. But if you mean the festival itself, maybe my answer is if you'll help us, because we don't have much. So we only asked people for their role, their organization, and then ways to get in touch. So perhaps we can talk after this if you want to help get involved to turn that data set into something that can tell us more about diversity. We could sorry, thinking on my feet actually, we've got a feedback survey, so we could add more diversity in the feedback survey, but that normally gets only like 20% of people responding. So we can try, Sian. Email me if you're up for the challenge, and maybe we can try to do our best. How does the data collective work? Oh, Tracy. Hi, Tracy. How does the data collective work alongside other data support initiatives across the US, UK, Grand Dreams, such as SCVO Digital? Yes, great question. Big fan of SCVO. John and Maddie, who I think were both at the festival at various times, are absolutely wonderful and have been a really big support in getting the word out about the collective. But how do we work alongside? So, I mean, I think I'm talking the abstract, talking in particular with organisations like SCVO. I kind of picked out all the Scottish-based organisations that had joined the collective and said, "Do you want support from SCVO?" So in that way, we can kind of literally handpick and make connections. I think on broader terms, we have and want to make sure that any things like training, like existing offers that are available from organisations, are made available across network. So we advertise things SCVO did in the Data Collective, and we advertise, or we asked, and they were kind enough to advertise Data Collective events in SCVO's membership community as well. Sorry, SCVO, for people who don't know, Scottish Council of Voluntary Organisations. So the Scottish counterpart to NCVO, the English version, and then there's Welsh and Northern Ireland versions too. So yeah, there's overlap in terms of making sure audiences are made aware of the interesting stuff that others are doing. Yeah, I suspect. I mean, I'll open up the chat if anyone from SCVO is here. You can. Hey, Oh, sorry. I thought it was the other Maddie, but it's a different Madeline. So false alarm. I thought SCVO had replied. I suspect SCVO would say they don't have a particular area of focus in supporting data sharing in organisations. So I think it is more like advertising than doing any kind of more, I guess, more technical or more involved work together. In terms of others, who else did we link up with? I mean, a lot of link up with the other organisations involved at Catalyst. Catalyst did a lot of digital work with a lot of charities, probably some of those present. Carefree, for example, who presented yesterday. So we try to link into all those organisations. We had, again, like advertising from organisations like NCVO, Small Charities Coalition, etc. So I think, I think the main tie-ins are making sure audiences are plugged in. Tracy, asked another question while I was rambling. Have you looked at the diversity of people, organisations taking part, e.g. geography? Does it break from London-centric, small, large orgs, demographic characteristics of people attending? I'm assuming this one is a data collective question, not a festival question, but tell me in the chat if I'm wrong. Yes, so yes, we did. So there's a details on kind of methodology of some of the user research that Data Collective did. For that, we made sure that we were getting in broad range of voices from, I think all those facets, definitely from geography, from organisational size, from demographic characteristics of people attending. When it came to events, we tried to plug in to places where lots of different organisations would look in order to maximise the likelihood that we had people from all different types and places coming. There was I'd say, looking back at different events, the first people to sign up and the people for whom attending events was most accessible tended to be the people who were supporting. So I'd say we had a definite skew towards support organisations, like organisations like DataKind, for example, like SCVO, because those organisations are in a position where they want to learn to support other organisations doing this kind of stuff. I think at the frontline service delivery charities in particular are been quite a busy year. So you're going to have, I think, less readiness from people to take time out to do other things. So that was most definitely a challenge. I think we overcame that, or tried to overcome that, by being quite specific about what the offer was and what people would get out of it, so they understood if it was a good use of their time. Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say on that front. Probably the other thing to say is that events tended to be quite small. So we do things like community calls, which you saw the screenshot was maybe 10 people. Our social, or you're at the Christmas social, that is maybe 15 people. So we try to make sure that kind of event to event, that we were make sure that they were inclusive, and that kind of people were coming and getting kind of understanding what they were getting out of it, and that we were following up and sending a lot of feedback and understanding how we could do better next time, etc. So quite a kind of human-centric, quite individually focused community. I'm rambling a lot. I think this is the problem with not being facilitated in questions. We have 2 minutes. Looking if there's any. Oh, Rosario from NPC, hi. Will the collective join forces with existing data sharing and open source initiatives? Yes, please. This would be amazing. I think part of the problem with like spinning up a brand quickly is it becomes like a thing that you need to work out like how that entity interacts with other entities. But really, it's just a bunch of us doing good data sharing social sector work, and we want to work with everyone else who's doing good data sharing social sector work like you. So for those who don't know, Rosario has made an amazing at NPC made an amazing local needs data bank tool with Turn to Us and Bustle UK, and we highlight that all the time because it's an amazing, absolutely amazing example of getting organisations to share data with others and to be public about their data at an aggregated level. So amazing, which is probably, I was remiss for not saying this at the start, we are not the beginning of data sharing in the social sector. Loads of good stuff has come before. We just want to support more work to come after. And then perhaps one more. We've got 2 more. Firstly, Anna, what do you look for as the data collective, whether the request comes from an individual organisation, for potential collaborations on data initiatives? And then Sam, how much funding does data collective need to raise, and how can we help? I love that question, Sam. What do we look for as data collective for potential collaborations? I mean, I guess we just facilitate, so I guess we don't look for anything, in as much as we wouldn't be the data owners or create the thing, but we would look for to support organisations who are civil society organisations. So essentially any form of like social change organisation, like social enterprise, charities, public sector, etc. And we look for organisations who were in a position to share their data, or in a position to be supported to do that. So if you said, okay, we think we can do it, but we need X and Y, we will try our best to like connect you with those with X and Y. But we wouldn't kind of take it off you as a challenge or a project. We very much want to leave the kind of power and the control and ownership in the hands of the organisations who own that data. And then how much funding does data collective need? The 4 months we had was about 40k from Catalyst. I would love to do something that was multi-year, so I'd love to look for. We've done a bunch of the startup stuff, so maybe cost would be lower. But I mean, I'd love loads of money. I don't know what the sum is, but anything between 60k and a gazillion K would be fabulous. I am talking to funders already. Maybe some of them are here. If you are, please come to Data Collective. But what I'd quite like, if possible, is to do this quite component-wise. So one of the things, like for example, one of the things we need is, over time now, I'm going to stop in a second. One of the things we know we need is community support, so community development, facilitation, etc. And that would be an ongoing role. But other things I've talked about, we might look to kind of add on as bricks. So for example, like training budgets, we might say, okay, let's see if we can get 20k to run this particular series of events or workshops or courses for free for organizations who we know would benefit. So if you see potential to kind of plug those kind of things in, let's all just plug it in. It's heavily democratized. Like I'm standing here talking about it because the other organisers as part of the team weren't as keen to, but I'm very much kind of communicating the message. I'm not the only person or single face for the Data Collective, and we'd love to get more people, more teams involved. We've already got organisationally, we've got social finance supporting us, we've got Centre for Youth Impact, we've got New Speak House, and then we've got a bunch of individuals as well. And I'd love to have more, for that to be more organisations and for us to be a mesh. I think we're more powerful together. Thank you for your questions. I'm late, so I'm going to say goodbye, but please do get in touch. My email is on the DataKind website, and you have the Data Collective as well, so sign up if you haven't already.